Well, good evening. I call the regular meeting of the Ames City Council to order. Good evening, Council, and those in the audience. We're going to start off tonight with a proclamation for Fair Housing Month for April 2022. Good evening, ladies.
Good evening.
Fair Housing Month. Whereas April is Fair Housing Month, a time when we celebrate the Fair Housing Act and recommit ourselves to ensuring every American has access to housing that is free from discrimination. The Fair Housing Act makes it unlawful to discriminate in housing transactions based on race, color, national origin, religion, sex, disability, or family status. This year, HUD has especially focused on protecting the rights of individuals to feel safe and secure in their homes, free from sexual harassment or unwanted sexual advances. And whereas this year's Fair Housing Month theme continues to be fair housing, more than just words, reflects the Biden-Harris administration's commitment to advancing equity in housing and the importance of increasing public awareness of everyone's rights to fair housing. And whereas the City of Ames additionally prohibits discrimination in the areas of housing, education, employment, public accommodations or services, credit, sexual orientation, developmental disability, physical disability, gender and gender identity, and whereas equality of opportunity for all is a fundamental policy of this nation, state, county, and city, and that fair housing is a positive community good, and whereas only with the cooperation, commitment, and support from HUD, the City of Ames, the Ames Human Relations Commission, the Central Iowa Board of Realtors, area housing providers, and all of the residents of Ames and Story County can barriers to equality of opportunity be removed. Therefore, I, John A. Hala, Mayor of the City of Ames, Iowa, do hereby proclaim the month of April 2022 as Fair Housing Month and establish Ames and Story County as an inclusive community committed to fair housing and encourage all citizens of our community to support and endorse fair housing, reaffirm their commitment to fair housing for all, and wholeheartedly recognize these rights and responsibilities throughout the year. It's my honor to present this to Deb and Vanessa, and do you have some comments you wish to make?
Certainly. Thank you, Mayor and Council, for setting aside time to do this proclamation. We know how important fair housing is for our community, and having the pandemic and seeing a lot of our individuals and families being housed, losing their housing, and a lot of things going on due to the pandemic, it is more important now than ever that we continue to educate the public about the importance of getting the word out, educating our landlords, realtors, citizens, nonprofit organizations about the importance of this law and how access to housing is so important for our community. So I thank you very much. We're partnering with the Ames Human Relations Commission and the Central Iowa Board of Realtors. We're going to do some public announcements. We're each doing some activities. We're going to be doing, the city's going to be hosting a webinar on fair housing hosted by HUD that we're inviting the public to come view here at the council chambers, and just a variety of things to educate and continue to educate the public. So I really thank them for their partnership in this effort. And now turn over to Deb.
Good evening, and as staff liaison for the Human Relations Commission, I want to thank Council for their support and Vanessa for the opportunity to partner in this very important endeavor this month. Ames Human Relations Commission has an award called a Home for Everyone Award that's offered annually. And the commission met last week. They did select an individual, and we will have the presentation of that award at the April 26th council meeting. So stay tuned for that, and we'll continue partnering with the efforts that Vanessa has planned for this month. We did a little education on KHOI this morning. One of the commission members, Lynette Plander, was with Vanessa, and they talked about the importance of fair housing and the commission's role in that. So thank you, and thank you for all of your support.
All right, moving on to consent agenda. Council staff has asked that we pull item number 19. So far, they have not received the signed agreement from the other party. So does council wish to pull any other items from consent tonight? Hearing none, I entertain a motion approving consent less item number 19.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Moving on to public forum. This is time we set aside for the public to address council on items that are not on the agenda. I ask individuals to limit their comments to 3 minutes or less. And I have one card thus far from Richard, and then we'll open it up to other people.
At the last city council meeting, during the thing, there was a thing about a city naming policy. And I had some, it says in this thing, anonymous, and it's like, I know several years ago, I remember Bob Kendrick's response when I wanted to tell him the name of those dragons that were out there, back there, and it's like I wanted to be names. I wanted to be Please Let Us Be Naked, and I spoke to the Public Art Commission or the whatever it was on that Wednesday afternoon, and they got a little bit of my story and basically decided to change what I wanted it to name it to some of the things in my story. Like I was talking to them about spending a day with people sunrise to sunset, so I could get to know them, they could get to know me, we could build the world a better place. And they go, we'll say you want to change the name of those dragons to sunrise to sunset. And I did not want that. And I went to the next one and I complained to them about that. And I even went to a couple of attorneys when I wanted to have the motto of Ames be named Ames home, and they get 7,000 comments and they didn't want to hear anymore. And they closed the meeting this is all before any of you were up there. And I mean, I'm living in my past. I remember Bob Kendra saying that it's like he's found no surprise in saying that please let us be naked for the names of a couple of dragons. And I couldn't speak to the things that the employees were only allowed to speak to, and I'm not an employee, but people treated me like I was an employee of the city by getting the door for them. And it's like people would complain to me, when the police would give them double parking tickets for parking up there on the thing. And I remember there was like an 80, 90-year-old man who was couldn't speak a word of English. And the police came out and he got out of a wheelchair and it was going into the city council to pay his electric bill. And he came out and the police were giving him a ticket. And I was telling the policewoman, look, he doesn't understand a word of English. And you're telling him, he was a wheelchair. He came out and it's like, Emily gets up and, you can't double park here.
Can you draw your comments to close, Richard, please? Thank you. Hector?
Good afternoon, everybody.
I'm sorry, I forgot to ask, Rich. We know, Richard, if you just introduce yourself and your address, and go ahead, Hector.
My name is Hector Arbuckle, and I live at 2503 Bruner Drive.
Thank you.
And before I begin, today I'll be talking about subdivisions, but I want to clarify that this is in no way specific about this Ansley subdivision. Steve Bergetson actually took me down to visit, and it was pretty awesome. So just wanted to clarify that this is not specifically about that subdivision. So today, City Council is once again considering a new subdivision. I think that Council should consider applying a cost-benefit fiscal analysis approach to evaluating proposed subdivisions to ensure that the new subdivisions will financially benefit this city in the long term. Through your work on the Climate Action Plan, this council has shown that you want Ames to thrive not just today, but also for future generations. When a new subdivision is created, the city gets two things. On the one hand, we get new sources of tax revenue and service fees. On the other hand, we get new infrastructure maintenance obligations, as well as an increased land area to provide with services like police and fire protection. The trouble with subdivisions is that we get our new tax revenue immediately, but we don't have to start repairing or replacing the infrastructure for a couple of decades. This means that a subdivision might improve our finances in the short term when the new tax revenue is flowing and the infrastructure is new, but after a couple decades, when the streets need resurfacing and the sewers need repair, the revenue and fees from the subdivision might not be enough, and the area might make our finances worse in the long term. The question the city should ask itself is, in 20 or 40 years, will this subdivision be a net gain for the city, allowing us to maintain our low tax rates and maintain our high-quality services, or will it be a net drain, forcing future councils to increase tax rates, cut services, or even take on debt just to maintain the streets and sewers? All that the city has to do is estimate the future revenues and fees of this development versus the infrastructure and service costs over multiple decades. The city of Fate, Texas does exactly this, so it can be done. The creation of subdivisions is an important task that can set the city up for future success and add really awesome new areas to the city. But we need to be careful because if we're not careful, we can burden future generations with difficult things to pay for. I ask council to investigate the fiscal analysis done by Fate, Texas, so that we can assure that new subdivisions pencil out and that Ames continues to thrive for generations to come.
Would you repeat the name of the city? I'm sorry.
Fate, Texas.
Would you spell that? F-A?
F-A-T-E.
All right. Anybody else? Hi, Sarah.
Good evening, Mayor and members of the Ames City Council. My name is Sarah Dvorsky, and I am here on behalf of Ames Main Street, the organization I am proud to serve as executive director for. Ames Main Street has spent the past several months revisiting our visioning process for both our organization and where we see the next big thing for downtown Ames. I would like to invite each of you to attend our upcoming public forums to discuss the next big thing. We are hosting 3 one-hour sessions, all identical, just different dates and times to vary a variety of schedules. We believe public input, including community, downtown stakeholders, and business owners, is very important to this process. Forums will be held Monday, April 18th at 4 p.m., Tuesday, April 19th at 7:30 a.m., and Thursday, April 21st at 12 p.m. All forums will be held at the Ames Chamber of Commerce. I hope to see you all at a forum next week.
Thanks, Sarah. Anybody else? All right, we'll close public forum. We're going to move on to item number 29. Brian?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't think we have much to present here for you. The City Council requested that we revisit this at this particular meeting, and that's the topic of whether to maintain the blue and yellow colors for the Highway 30 lights and the bandshell lights in solidarity with Ukraine, or to do something different. So I'll leave it up to the council to decide what you'd like to do.
Brian, when the city makes decisions about changing the light color for something like Iowa State games, is that just the staff making that decision based on the event that's occurring?
Yes.
There is no request that's coming in. It seems to me that if there aren't any upcoming events, as I think we've learned from the report, that as far as I'm concerned, we can leave the lights the colors that they are, and then when staff has another event that's coming up that would typically require the changing of the lights, that would trigger a different color scheme, unless there's something else that comes up in the intervening time. So I don't know, do you want a motion on that?
You have any other comments before we take a motion?
Well, I wondered if we, and I am for keeping the lights up, but if we wanted to consider at any point some type of a policy, just knowing there's like 40 different conflicts going on in the world right now. How does the board decide, I mean, the council, sorry, wrong meeting, council decide which of those that it will support? And again, I have no problem with keeping this up. I'm asking if we want to consider a policy, if the council wants to consider setting up some type of a policy.
Is there currently a policy right now, Brian?
There is a policy that primarily deals with how requests can be made for changing the lights, and this is just on the Highway 30 lights. There's, we don't change the lights for, an individual's birthday or something like that. It's got to be a city, state, or federal recognized event. So, for example, we change it to orange in recognition of highway construction safety, or for events where we have a proclamation. So for events like that, and then for recognizing Ames High and Iowa State home football games. Those are the ones that are specifically listed in the policy.
So it would be an extension of that. I'm just trying to, if someone came about another conflict going on in another part of the world, how would we make that decision versus this one that we've made for Ukraine?
Yeah, I mean, admittedly, it's a bit of an ad hoc right now. This sort of came out of the blue as other cities were doing this. So I guess my general approach is, if it's not broken, let's not, I mean, if we start having these kind of requests, then I think that would prompt us. But I think right now there's very little going on. I don't want to spend a lot of time on developing a policy when there really isn't a demand for it at this point. But it's certainly possible if people see this as an opportunity to bring attention to a particular cause.
I think we did see a couple of requests for this Ukraine coloring specifically. So maybe we will start getting more requests in the future. I know that this was kind of community prompted and not just a decision we made on our own.
And I didn't know if there was any value in discussing that when it's not an issue yet. But whatever the council thinks.
Well, I entertain first of all a motion regarding the continuation or cessation, and I think maybe time specific would be helpful too, to give another. When's your next anticipated event? Do you have any idea?
I think later this summer.
So the question is, does council want us to keep on going on for months, or do you want to have it cease at a certain point in time?
It seems to me that we could simply say at this point, we're leaving them the color they are, and that if the situation changes, we could just bring that back as a motion.
Can I make a motion?
So I would move that we leave the lights blue and yellow until the next event that has been approved to change the lighting color.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And Anita, do you want to make a motion or not? You want to just?
I'll move that the council consider modifications to the current policy for lighting in order to consider other types of events that the council would be willing to support. Well, how we make those decisions about what other events the council would be willing to support.
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion? Further discussion?
I would say the lights at Van Shell and the programmability of those lights has changed too. So I'm sure staff would, but we should bring maybe that Van Shell lighting in under the same policy that the highway lighting is under.
You okay with that amendment?
Yes.
Okay. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. All right. Moving on to item 30, discussion on tax increment financing request for small lot industrial development located at 2105 and 2421 Dayton.
Good evening. City Council reviewed a more complete proposal for a draft development agreement at your prior meeting. You specifically asked us to address one issue, which is what this report is discussing, which is the appropriations clause. We originally had recommended that the repayment of the TIF rebate to the developer be based on an annual appropriation by City Council. The developer was concerned about that because there was less certainty about that having to happen every year. After reviewing the appropriations clause, and we've given you kind of a different way to think about this. We've given you kind of three ways to think about how we do TIF development, whether we're the agency doing the improvements, whether it's a financial subsidy to close a financial gap, which would be like the Kingland example, or in this case, a new model where we're having infrastructure installed, but the developer's doing that. We think that looking at this model with the developer as a partner for infrastructure construction justifies looking at it differently than the Kingland model of a financial subsidy. And we are now okay with removing the appropriations clause. And we would recommend moving forward with the development agreement as presented at the last meeting without the appropriations clause.
Questions for staff?
Kelly, I appreciate the fact that you continued working with the developer on this. And the only question I have is, do we know now whether those non-appropriation clauses typically were for projects that did not involve infrastructure that would have been required anyway by the city?
We don't know that. We looked at a state report that indicated a substantial amount of money and a substantial number of cities use them, but we didn't dig into trying to find every urban renewal plan and look at how they go about doing that. So no, we did not do that.
It just seems like it would be worth, maybe not worth staff time, but worth knowing for future projects where we have to make that distinction between something that is infrastructure that the city would be putting in anyway versus something that the developer would typically pay for.
Okay, open up public input. Does anyone make any comments on this item tonight? All right, close public input. Any further discussion, council? Otherwise, entertain a motion.
And the only other thing I was going to add that's different than the last meeting is rather than immediately bring you a development agreement, it's going to be deferred till later this summer when you've seen the preliminary plat and there's a little more clarity on total costs. We're still looking at that 2.6 million as the benchmark to look at it, but we won't know those costs until the preliminary plat comes later this summer.
Is there a motion directing staff to prepare a development agreement for approval in early fall 2022?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
Mayor, I'd like to offer a motion. I think it's still germane to this topic. I sent council an email to this effect. The discussion that we had in our prior meeting on this yielded a point that we as a council didn't really understand, and that is this idea of having annual votes on certain types of commitments and how that would affect our bond rating. And in visiting with the city attorney, he was of the opinion that it would be beneficial for us. I'm not sure I'm saying this correctly, Mark, but be helpful for us to have some guidance from our bond counsel with respect to the legality and propriety of doing this in the future. And we've got a major project coming up on Lincoln Way, and I'm going to defer to whatever the bond attorney says. I'm not offering the city legal advice, but I think it'd be helpful for us to work through this issue prior to the Link project coming back. So I would move that we direct the city attorney to provide a legal memorandum to the council with respect to the propriety and legality of this type of annual approval.
Second?
Okay, discussion?
Does this make the most sense for Mark to do or for Dwayne in finance?
So that is a good question, because certainly what we do here affects the bond rating. So I guess I would like to start with the legal counsel, and maybe with that point that you just raised, that because this will involve our financing, that Mark would interface with our finance team as well. That makes good sense.
The motion allows him to consult with who he thinks is appropriate to get information. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, item 31, update on low-income housing tax credit, development options for multifamily housing. Vanessa.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This item before you is a follow-up from our March 8th meeting where we brought you 4 options to consider as we further deliberate how we want to proceed on the development of low-income tax credits out on the Baker subdivision on State Avenue. And as you know, we originally started out with a 37-unit, 9% tax credit project that did not get funded. And so we were looking at other options to try to fund the project and end up with some options that we could go pursue a 4% LIHTC option using part of our home funds and possibly our home ARP funds as well, totaling about $2 million. And so you wanted us to pursue some further options. Option number 3, to look at if the project would still be viable and some other timeframes we needed to delay it. So prior to us meeting with Prairie Fire to discuss what we had received direction from you on, we wanted to kind of relook at what our funding options were to make sure that they were accurate in what we were looking at. And currently our regular home fund balance is approximately $1.53 million. And then we also anticipate our 22-23 home allocation to be about what we got this current year, which is about $350,000. Now, as you know, that the allocation for next year has not been announced yet. I did hear that hopefully it's going to be sometime in May that they will come out with allocations. So, and then we can know for sure how close we would be to the 1.8 if we combine our current balance with their anticipated 2022-23 balance. So we also looked at the home op guidelines to possibly bring some of those funds to the project, possibly around $200,000 to add to the 1.8 to get to the 2 million. But the op program is still unclear. There's still guidelines coming back and forth, and there's still a lot of entitlement communities that are getting their allocations plan rejected from HUD. And so we want to kind of see what's going on so that when we get to that point, we can be successful in submitting our plan. We believe there's some possibilities, but we didn't want to project that at this time until we got further into making sure our guidelines for how we can use op funds are clear. So with that in mind, and based on the availability of those funds, we did talk with Prairie Fire about the $1.8 million option, and they did respond saying that they could be interested in home funds. This option would reduce the units down from 37 down to 30 affordable housing units, and the design would be very similar. They would just be eliminating one of the buildings that would be located on the south portion of the site, which I think Kelly has brought up for you to view. And this is the reason they feel that the project is the construction cost has been one of our concerns because it has been going up. But the developer, hopefully that as prices are starting to come down, that we could still stay in this price range. And so if the council wanted to proceed with this project with Purifier, they could pursue the 4% credits through the Finance Authority. The 4% application is a monthly application, so they could submit that application at any time. And we also was concerned about if they wanted to submit the application and where funding isn't quite finalized, how would that help the application? And it basically, we would have to just write a letter to the Iowa Finance Authority, letting them know that, yes, we are committing these dollars. And once we finalize the remaining of our home allocation, then we could proceed with finalizing our local match towards the project. So that is an option for us to consider. We talked about using partial tax abatement with the project that could potentially help with the financing of the project. And we would certainly look at that in more detail at a later date once we look at a developer's agreement. So steps to identify that would have to hopefully groundbreaking sometime this fall, because it is an open window application, and we would know sooner than later, within 30 to 45 days. Hopefully after application is submitted, we would know if we were funded. We also wanted, is there any questions about that option before I go to option 2? Okay.
So if the city's going to provide property tax or partial property tax abatement, would that then reduce the $1.8 million contribution to keep it at 1.8 million, or would that be in addition to the 1.8 million?
It would be in addition to, it'll be get closer to get it to the 2 million.
And Vanessa,
The main benefit is it can be the match. So if
Right.
we spend 1.8, we got to find a way to help. So maybe it's probably more than 1.8 with the abatement, not less. Probably.
Vanessa, could you clarify? So we're going from 37 down to 30 affordable housing units, but how many total units would be on this parcel?
30.
So initially,
Initially, there were 37,
Right.
and 2 were market rate, and the
5 market.
5 market rate, excuse me, and the remaining would have been low income.
And so the goal of that was to have at least some level of mixture between affordable and market rate housing. In this proposal, it's all affordable housing.
Correct, because the 9% allows you to have a mixture of market and affordable, where the 4%, you have to be at the 60% or less.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we also wanted to give you another option, and that's just going out for a request for new proposals. And the agreement that we had, like we just talked about, there were 37 units, 32 affordable, 2%, and that would be doing the 9% tax credits. And again, the city would, initially, we had allocated $350,000 of our home funds, but since we didn't use that, we could repurpose that money to go into a new proposal, and also look at using the 1.8 to go out for a new RFP to see what kind of applications we might get, and looking for other partner developers, and either taking that 1.8 million and looking at a 9% credit application, or taking it and doing the 4%, but going out for proposals. But with either option, we would be using, if the council's willing, our entire 1.8 million of local home funds that we would be set aside, but we would just start a fresh new process. Now, starting this process, it would delay the project to either 2023 or 2024. And then again, there's no guarantee that we would get a proposal, and there's no guarantee that if we went for the 9%, we would get funded. But if we went for 4%, we probably could. So those are all those options. So Again, we wanted to just give you those options. If council is willing to accept the 30-unit project, we believe we could start the construction this year, and we would come back later on at the end of April and bring you a developer's agreement with Prairie Fire if you choose to go that route. If not, we would work on doing a request for proposals based on if you wanted us to use the entire $1.8 million to go out for a request for proposals for either a 9% or 4% for the coming year to see what that would bring. Did I leave something out?
Questions?
Am I correct that if we chose option 2, that would also involve going back to the community with a new developer and making sure that that plan was one that the community was comfortable with?
Certainly, if we went out for a new request for proposals and we came down to how many developers we got, as we did before, we would involve the neighborhood and get their input on the various proposals. And as we've done before, they also are aware of this option on council tonight. And the last one, I did communicate that with them. And so we would always keep them involved in where we are with this project.
Thank you.
I have some follow-up questions. So I am absolutely lost in terms of trying to figure out what the amount of the subsidy is per unit of affordable housing. So what was a 37-unit project is now down to a 30-unit. And so the amount of money that we're spending per unit, I assume, is going up. Do we have any sense of the amount of subsidy that we're at per unit?
So there's different buckets of subsidy. So you're right. So originally there was 70% of the project was being paid for by tax credits.
Right.
Very little of it was coming from us. Now it's closer to 70% us and 40% from tax, or 60% from us and 40% by tax credits. So what do you mean by like the subsidy per unit? Is it our dollars that are going into it or just total cost of the project?
Yeah, so that's fair. So I guess I'm a little more concerned about the taxpayer dollars first. I mean, I think we should be good stewards with the federal monies that were entrusted to us. But particularly if we were to look at just what the city of Ames has invested, I think it's important for us to understand the amount of subsidy of Ames tax dollars per unit.
Isn't it all federal? I mean, CDBG money is federal money. So it's either state or it's our federal money, but
Yeah, it's
still federal.
But it's not.
There's a match. So there is, essentially it's all federal money, but anytime we spend a home dollar, we have to spend 25 cents of our own money. So that doesn't matter if it's this project or anything else.
So the match part,
There's a 25% match on our
but not the 1.8.
That is 25% of the 1.8 has to be local money.
But not the whole, right, 25%.
Again, it doesn't matter if it's this project or whatever we do with it, the match exists.
Yep.
Now for CDBG, we didn't have to have a match.
Oh, okay.
But for our home program, when we initially are doing the subdivision, we use local tax dollars, geo bonds as our match when we did the infrastructure, because we knew that we were going to use home funds in the future. So we were able to match our initial allocation with doing geo bonds. So as we increase the amount of home every year, you got to come up with that additional 25% match.
Sure. Thank you.
So if you look at it that way, if you want to just use our home match as what does the taxpayer have to put in the project, you're looking at about $15,000 per unit in the 30-unit project. So 25% of 1.8 million and then divide by 30 would get you to that taxpayer contribution.
And that's not including anything with respect to the infrastructure we put in, because none of
the federal money.
Right. And then the other question I had deals with density. So when you look at this property, this has really changed from when we first looked at this. So when we originally presented with different alternatives for contractors, the one that the staff proposed was proposing 50 units of family housing, and then 90% of that would be affordable, so 45 units. And so from a philosophy perspective, one of the things that we're trying to do is to encourage density. And so we have a lot of pressure on us to find more places for bodies in this, in the community. And so instead of increasing the density on this project, we're actually lowering the density. And I'm just curious, maybe Kelly, from a housing perspective, if this was not just from a perspective of, if this was a non-affordable project, if this was just a regular developer that had a property like this, how many units of rental property could theoretically, and it'd be a range obviously, but how many units could a property like this sustain?
So if it was comparable FSRM zoning, it would be pretty similar. It's only when you jump to RH that you do probably larger buildings and get a little more efficiency. So this is at about 11 units per acre. When we're doing apartment projects on the edge of the city and FSRM, we're somewhere between 10 and 13, 10 and 14 probably. Just kind of the inefficiencies of the medium density zoning. That's where
Right.
you end up.
And let's assume the same zoning. So that would be how many units for this
It's a
property?
2.7 acre site, so it'd be between 30 and 40. So I would say it's a different building type than we normally see, but I think the density is similar to the developer's preferred model.
Yeah.
At RM, it's RH where you see the totally different densities.
So, all right, so I just want to make a point. I think that we're moving in the wrong direction in terms of density. That's all I have.
Any other questions? Vanessa, can you just comment on timing? So let's just say for sake of discussion, the developer still has an out. If their costs come in too high and the council doesn't want to put more money in, and this goes away, and they have to, hopefully it doesn't happen, they have to go all over again. When would that decision, when would they let you know, or the city know, whether it's a green light or a red light? Do you have any idea? You talk about groundbreaking this fall, so would that be early midsummer, or have they indicated when they might let you know?
Well, the discussion was that they would, if you chose that option, they would look at trying to get their application submitted to IFA sometime in May. And I believe IFA on the 4% can have a 30 to 45 day turnaround. So that would give them the option, once they go through all the DRC process and getting that cleared, that's still something they would have to do unless they do it prior to submitting the application. It's up to Kelly's call on that, how that works.
There's a lot of, if you picked option one, there's a lot of next steps. It appears they're willing to work at risk, that we will come through with the $1.8 million, but they're going to have to, they haven't developed their site plan and they haven't gone into building design yet. So to meet that October groundbreaking, they have to start that concurrently with doing the financing with the state. So I think there's a lot of places where it could fall apart, but the first step is we need a development agreement that says they're going to commit to doing this in a certain time frame, because I feel like we're supporting option one because it's the quickest option. If they're not willing to commit to that, I think it's a different evaluation of the idea and the project. Mm-hmm. They have an inflation built in of 1.5% per month on construction costs. That's why they have October circled, because that's where their cost estimates are based on being able to start work, have it priced to begin in October. If it gets delayed till next March, all bets are off. It's not what they have in their pro forma.
But if the construction material didn't meet what they were plugging in for numbers,
they probably won't know that till late summer. So it'd be about the same time that we're probably adopting our annual action plan based on best available information.
Right.
Just try to anticipate that if that went sideways and council has to start all over again, issuing an RFP and trying to hit that, isn't a 9% light tech application like in March, I think?
Yeah, it would be similar when we first started the process. Initially, we did an RFP in August. We had, and we brought that to council, and we had a developers agreement in December, and they submitted an application to IFA in March.
Yeah, I was trying to tease out if they say red light in October, that may push it back a year and a half essentially, because if they're trying to go for a 9% light tech, see, we're starting too late. We're starting 3 or 4 months, 2 months, 2.5 months. I didn't know if they could accelerate their process for red light, green light. So council has the opportunity to try and either move forward with them, or if they have to go some other direction, staff needs time to go out and put a new RFP out, get a developer selected. I hope that doesn't happen, but I'm just trying to anticipate if it did happen, how are you going to handle that?
Well, it's not really all on them. We can't commit $1.8 million to them yet because we don't have $1.8 million. So it's not even all on them to make a firm commitment. It's a tenuous partnership that we're both taking risk, more so them because they're actually going to spend money, and we're going to sit and try to collect money and then marry it up.
So the point being is we don't know, but it's possible that if the wheels fall off this in October.
I think it'll be before October.
Okay.
Because they'll have to have their approvals, and hopefully we will have completed our annual action plan.
Just to be clear, I hope it does not happen. But I'm just trying to think ahead in terms of if it
So I
did,
think
how's that going to affect everything?
So teasing out a little bit more what you said, Mayor, if it does fall apart in August, we'll be in the perfect time frame to restart for the next cycle in the spring. So it doesn't hamper regrouping and doing it again next year if unfortunately that's what happens.
Yeah, and if HUD is true to what they're anticipating, that allocations may come out next month, then we at least know what our allocation would be. But our plan won't be submitted until August.
Okay. All right.
Just out of curiosity, if we were to put out another RFP, would that be roughly the same RFP that we put out before, or does it have to go through more discussion and massaging before it could be released?
I think we can just kind of revise it. We wouldn't have to start from scratch because we haven't picked anything at this point, but we do have the shell ready to go. We just have to kind of plug in whether we're going for 9% or 4% and finalize what commitments we're going to make financially to the project.
I mean, we had up to 50 units in the last RFP and some basic design requirements. Unless I hear otherwise, I wouldn't assume we need to revise those. I think it's just about the local contribution is the key difference that we're looking at.
Okay. All right, open up public input. Does anyone want to address council on this item tonight?
Hello, do I restate where I'm living and everything? Hector Arbuckle, 2503 Bruner Drive. So I would like to second what Councilman Garten said about, I've noticed also that the density and the number of units of this project has gone down and down. From what I've read and studied, the allowing an increase in housing density tends to be beneficial for increasing the housing supply within places where people want to live, and thus increasing affordability. I'm wondering, could council consider if council considers doing another RFP, could you consider raising changing the zoning from FSRM to something more like RH or even CSC or DSC? Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Close public input.
Can I answer Hector's question real quick? So this parcel of land has quite a history with its zoning. And so the city was in a lawsuit so that it didn't become RH. So for us to turn around and then make it RH, I don't know, that it wouldn't have the best optics, I don't think. So I hear what you're saying about density, and in general, I'm in agreement that, we have to densify our core rather than sprawl. So I totally get that. I think for this property, though, we're looking at a fair compromise where it's certainly more than the neighbors wanted initially with any multifamily at all. And so I think in this case, it's an okay compromise. So.
Okay. I'd entertain a motion.
I'd move option 1.
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
Yeah, so I'll be voting no tonight, and I've tried not to hard to just beat the drum all over again, but for history purposes, I think it's valuable to note that when we first had this proposal, it was a much different opportunity for us, and I think this is a very inferior project. We had the opportunity to put in 50 units with a 90% mix, and it's a bit interesting. We marked had a proclamation for fair housing, and we're going the opposite direction from where that started. We had a commitment to look at having a mix of both market and affordable housing for a reason. And so rather than having a mix of housing, this is going to be 100% affordable. And we're missing out on the benefit of having that mix for the families and the children. The goal of having this done soon is valuable, but it has to be outweighed, I think, by the possibility of getting a much better project. So sometimes we have to take the very long view of things. And so as much as I'd like to move dirt in the fall, in the life of the city, 1 year is irrelevant. Whether this project starts in 2022 or 2023 or 2024, doesn't matter. What I think matters is we get a project that's going to serve the families. And those people aren't here tonight. Those advocates for affordable housing who should be here arguing for more units and a mixture of market and affordable housing aren't here. It's up to us to advocate for the poorest of the poor who would benefit from a better project, and we're not delivering that to them. So I'll be voting no on this proposal.
Those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Motion carried. Thank you. Moving on to item number 32, Parks and Recreation. Keith.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. So with great pleasure, I'm here tonight to talk about the Indoor Aquatic Center and some naming opportunities. And, you know, there's a lot of information in the council action forum. I'm not going to go through everything. I just want to highlight a few items with it. So one, in regards to donations, I do want to thank Dan Culhane, President and CEO of the Ames Chamber, for his willingness to go out and do some of the heavy lifting, have these conversations with a lot of people. And thus far, you know, with the 10 million in donations, the 2 million that the city has, and Dan has raised over 8 million to get us over that 10 million. So kudos to Dan and his efforts. So there is we do have a Parks and Recreation naming policy for facilities and major features. And there are 3 categories: historic events, people and places, outstanding individuals, major donations. The 3 that are before you tonight are all related to, you know, major donations. And the 3 naming opportunities, one for the facility itself is Mary and Rich Fitch have pledged $3 million to the project. And in return, we're suggesting that the facility be named the Fitch Family Indoor Aquatic Center. Mary Greeley is coming forward with $4 million, and we're proposing the Mary Greeley Medical Center Therapeutic Pool. And then Fairway with $500,000, you know, the Fairway Family Fun Zone, or the Fairway Fun Zone, not family, sorry, the Fairway Fun Zone, for the zero depth entry and the play structure. So with everything, again, I'm not going to go through all of the details, but the Parks and Recreation Commission at March 31st meeting, they did have conversation, and they do recommend that City Council approve, you know, alternative number 1, so the naming opportunities that I just mentioned. We are looking at the April 26th meeting of City Council is doing a recognition not only of these 3 major donors, but all donors, and we'll have that information for you. So we are very, very appreciative of these 3 donors: the Fitch Family, Mary Greeley Medical Center, and Fairway, for their efforts. So manager's recommendation is alternative 1, that City Council would approve these naming opportunities.
Questions?
Keith, what is the status on researching the naming of some aspect after Geidel Winokur for the bequest?
Yeah, so I did do some research on that, and for the people that were involved from the city's perspective with getting that donation, she did not have any interest in having anything named after her. So So we would not be bringing something forward in the future for that.
All right, open up public comment. Anyone want to address council on this item? Seeing none, close public comment. And I would just echo, thank you, Dan, for your efforts on behalf of the city council, and my goodness, the generosity of the Fitch family, Mary Greeley and Fairway for their generous contributions. So entertain a motion on recommendation.
Move alternative one.
All right,
Second.
move second. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Aye.
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 Thank you, Keith. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks again, Dan. All right, moving on. Item number 33, Mr. Dunn.
Just thought I'd give you a high-level summary of what this will end up getting us, the $61,500 that we're receiving from the state of Iowa. It will convert 40 acres to a restored native prairie. The modeling suggests that doing that will result in a 69% reduction in the nitrogen export off of that area and a 98% reduction in the phosphorus loss. The grant that we are receiving from the Water Infrastructure Fund through the Iowa Finance Authority will cover the cost of the contractor mobilizing to the site, doing the clearing and grubbing and the seeding with the native seed mix. And when it is all done, it will be ready for future improvements in that area to support some passive recreation, walking trails, biking trails, amenities like that. So with that, we would sure like to accept this $61,000.
Questions for John?
John, we've had some negative public reaction when we have gone into clear trees in the past, especially on Iowa Creek. I'm wondering if we are going to be having to do any outreach on this particular project to ensure that the public is aware of what the project is and how we are intending to move forward with it.
Yeah, that would certainly be our intent to publicize as actively as we can what's going to happen down in there. The prairie restoration will follow immediately after the clearing and grubbing takes place, so the area will look restored in a fairly short period of time. So I think that will help as well.
I understand that there have been some very productive meetings about Brookside and the Iowa Creek. And so I would love to see our citizens having a part in what's happening in this location.
Totally agree.
Okay. Is there a motion?
I would move alternative one.
Second.
Thank you.
And I want to just make a note. Brian provided the council an update. I just think if we're going to make a decision that has a financial implication for the coffers, we need to make a record of this. And Brian confirmed that the city receives $3,050 from Iowa State as rent for this farm. So that's money that we'll be foregoing going forward. This, I think it's a no-brainer here in terms of the benefits for the city. But I just want to make sure we noted that.
All right. Roll call.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Thanks, John. Moving on to item 34, hearing on rezoning of 3210 Cedar Lane from agricultural to floating suburban residential low density FSRL and plan unit development overlay.
While Benjamin's getting ready for the presentation, he'll lead you through the project. So this is our first PUD of single family homes. We did a PUD for some townhomes up north on 190th Street, but this is the first like large scale subdivision project, kind of like the meat of what the PUD ordinance was written to allow for. So we'll walk through that and Benjamin can fill you in on the details.
Good evening. As you can see up here on the map, the Ansley development outlined in blue is owned by the Bergeson family, and they're proposing to rezone and develop these 4 parcels, which account for 58.7 acres at the end of Cedar Lane on the south side of Ames. Site is accessed from Cedar Lane, which runs along the west side, from Aurora Avenue, which is up there in the northeast corner, and from the future extension of Lunetta Drive, which will come down there and hit Ansley on the east side of that top portion. Proposed development will include approximately 170 units, open space amenities, with a small neighborhood commercial area up in the northeast corner by the extension of Aurora. The property was annexed in 2019 and is subject to a pre-annexation agreement. The owner agreed to buy out the rural water provider, which is Xenia, at the time of development, and the developer is responsible for extending water and sewer to the site. The owner is requesting a rezoning from agricultural to floating suburban residential low density with a planned unit development overlay in order to pursue the specific vision. The proposed PUD overlay allows for a flexibility in lot patterns, uses, and certain development standards, including setbacks. Private streets are also permitted within a PUD, and the PUD process requires common open space and amenity areas along with a description of uses and design details. A master plan is accompanying this PUD, and we will get to that shortly. At the time of approval of the PUD, there is a zoning agreement required for the administration of the master plan. The developer intends for Ansley, and here is the master plan, to be a mix of housing types. The blue are the traditional detached single-family homes. The cottage court homes are the ones that are in the kind of beige and yellow, and those are all clustered around shorter streets that are the developer refers to as courts or cottage courts. And then the brown are going to be townhomes. So each of those brown lots will have a number of townhomes that are clustered on each lot. These are all designed in conjunction with one another and are intended to be of a similar character. The larger cottage court area in the middle of the site has a large communal space that will serve as the main yard area for the surrounding homes. The individual yards for each property are intended to be small. The setbacks on those cottage courts are intended to be 5 feet on all sides. Many of the properties will be served by alleys, and they will also face onto communal open space. The alleys will be private. The applicant has also developed detailed architectural standards to guide the individual house construction for consistency with the PUD development. The applicant has requested several deviations from the setbacks, which were an attachment in the staff report. The base setbacks for FSRL are 20 feet in the front, 6 to 8 feet on the side, and 20 in the rear. The PUD does require a minimum of 10% usable open space, and not including the right-of-way, there's a 35% open space on this site, including right-of-way is 29%. And that open space includes a variety of environments. There's the pond, there's the open space in the middle of the cottage courts, and at the south end, there's also another space that will be available to the community. The site does abut the existing Cedar Lane, as I mentioned, and Cedar Lane will be extended and improved there. And at the Planning Commission did recommend to approve, and with several conditions, including the buyout of the rural water service, and that the preliminary plat be approved. And that the development of the site shall not occur until Ames has a subdivision plat for the site. One other thing to mention is at the meeting, the Planning Commission meeting, the applicant did request to have the height of the townhomes match the height of the other structures, and I think that neglected to mention that in this report. So the townhomes should be at the same height as the single-family homes and the cottage court homes. And staff is recommending approval.
Questions?
Can you show us where the Domani development would be on this?
Sure. On this map, you can see it's there to the right. Right is north here. You can see where Lunetta Drive is kind of there. I think we've got, you can see a little bit, this is the phasing plan, and this has the lots, the proposed lots for Domani there.
I think it's an absolutely gorgeous development. I had a question. I'm having difficulty conceptualizing the access to the bike trail system. So someone is here. Are there dedicated bike trails within the subdivision, and how close are they to our existing trail system?
You can see here, I think this map shows it best. So at the top is west, and that is Cedar Lane. The shared use path is going to come along this west side of Cedar Lane down there to this road that connects right here. It's called Rothway. And it's going to come along the south side, the shared use path here, and then connect into the Tedesco Trail.
Okay, so that's the only shared use path that connects. There's other sidewalks and private walkways that could connect as well. There's another street intersection that's just off of here. You can get on the, where's that road?
Yeah, it's
It always
right.
takes us
It's right here, just south of the purple.
So you can get on there too. It's just not a shared use path width of walkway there.
Correct.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Other questions? All right, I'll declare the public hearing on this item to be open. Is there anybody in the audience that wants to address council on this item? And if you would, please try to keep your comments to 4 minutes or so if you can. Keith?
It's Keith Arneson, 4114 Cochran Parkway here in town. And I do own and I'm developing out the Domani subdivision. And that's really what I'm here to talk about. And I actually think that that community choice is important. And I applaud you for actions that you made relative to approving my PUD as well as my PRD as well as PUDs that, are before you tonight and will be coming again, I'm sure. So I have two concerns, and really they have to do with transition. And, you have approved my third phase of Domani, and that, if you have the entire presentation up, yes, that probably is the easiest way to look at it. So that's the third phase. The first two phases are 51 homes, and they're all 1 story or 1.5 story. 1.5 meaning that all the roof lines are exactly the same as if they were a single story, and you utilize the space in the attic with a dormer as the second story. So all 51 homes that I'm doing in there are 1 story or 1.5 story. This particular aspect of it, in every lot that adjoins or butts into the Ansley property, the 6 lots that you're looking at there on, I guess, the south side and the west side, those lots average 30,000 square feet, about 6,500ths of an acre or somewhere thereabouts. And I believe that what I think is somewhat confusing to people is the base zone for RL supports a 3-story building with a 2-story garage, detached structure if it happens to be in this particular plan. So where's my concern? Well, because you could say, well, I could go into my community and build 3-story homes. I've been building homes since 2003. I've developed 4 subdivisions, 260 lots in town. Not only have I never built a 3-story home or a 2.5-story home, it's never even been requested. So why does that concern me? Because perhaps that's the same thing that that the customers of this particular subdivision might feel the same way. However, a few things I think need to be noted, and one is that when you take lot sizes down from, normally my subdivisions develop out in an equal mix, roughly, of 1-story and 2-story, and I think that that's common with most conventional development around town. And I also don't think that if you look one example was made at Planning and Zoning of Old Town. Old Town had a housing type evidently that did have a single-story structure with a 3-story beside it. But short of that, none of my peers that I talked to have ever built a 3-story home in Ames on a conventional lot. Maybe you've seen one. I think it would be exceedingly rare. So again, what's my concern if the demand doesn't seem to be there? Well, one is that the master plan, the documents that the builder, that will be guiding the builders and was created by the architect, specifically calls out 3-story buildings with 2-story detached garages, number one. Number two, I have personally visited the community that this is patterned after in Atlanta. It is in a rural community and not in an urban community. It does not butt up against other approved subdivisions. And there are 3-story buildings in it, 2.5 and 3-story buildings. What else? Well, when this and the packet that you're looking at in there, if you take a look at the townhouse concept, which is the most concerning to me because it borders, it happens to be the purple lot here, is lot 123, I believe, on their master plat. But that is a townhouse project, and the request was made as an amendment that the limitations of height go from 2-story on the structure and 1-story on the garage to 3 stories on the structure and 1-story on the garage. So for all those reasons, when you take lots down to 4,000 square feet, when you increase density, I have no problem with increasing density. I have no problem with 3-story homes. I do think that the city has tried to make a conscious effort. And I think that same conscious effort was made with the multifamily to the south of my, to the east of my piece of ground there too. So I think that there were efforts made there. I know there's some discussion. Benjamin went on record at Planning and Zoning as saying that the developers were allowed up to 4-story in an RM. Well, I think if you talk to the developers, as I have, you would find out that they were strongly encouraged to decrease density from 3-story RH to 2-story RM, with the thinking that single-story would follow. When ag land comes in, single-story would follow. So for all of those reasons, I'm sitting here thinking, all right, how are my customers for these large lots going to feel when I tell them that there will be a townhouse project beside one side, and then 6, 7, and 8 are the lots that border the other side of my large lot approved subdivision? How are they going to feel when I say, well, there could be 3-story properties looking down on your single-story home and deck? And I do think it will have a negative impact on it. So what am I asking for? I'm really asking for two things. One, that just the properties that border, out of the 170 homes, the handful of lots that border my subdivision, I would like to see there be a limitation of 2-story in overall building height, 1-story in a detached garage. I will pledge the same for my 3rd edition. I will not build anything over 2 stories. I don't think there's a demand anyway, so it's easy for me to pledge that. Then when they get inside of that first row of buildings, the entire other 160 units of residential can be 3 stories, and more power to them. I think it's good to have customer choice, but that's one concern. The other concern is that the rear setback for these first 30 lots, if you look at them, the rear setback is 20 feet, even on the smallest lots, whether they border Cedar, whether they border the large lots. The only place that it doesn't is on the north portion of the property, where it backs up to 117-foot deep outlot, and then my piece of ground. So I would ask, while it's not nearly as important as the 3-story aspect of it to me, I would also ask that there be some consistency shown in regards to the outside perimeter where it butts into my property. I threw out a lot. I'm sorry. Do you have questions?
Could you just clarify, so what would you want the rear setbacks to be?
Well, I think 25 is consistent for all of the other lots in the subdivision. I don't see why the three lots that border my property are different.
So moving.
So 27 of their lots have that 25-foot rear buffer, either in directly on layout on the lot layout or via an outlot that Friedrich owns of 117 feet on the north side. And it's only when it gets to my side of the subdivision does it drop back to a smaller number.
So I apologize, you want to go from 20 to 25 foot?
No, it's not 20 or 25 where it butts into my property.
We can explain that when
Okay.
you want us to.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Other input?
Hello, my name is Hector Arbuckle, 2503 Bruno Drive. So I would like to ask council today. I do not think that there should be a precedent of people on one property being able to subjectively impose or subjectively use their aesthetic preferences to limit what other people do on their land. So I currently live in a townhouse, and I think it's pretty awesome. It's a townhouse that, doesn't really have a backyard, but, it's not that expensive, and that's what I like about it. We know that there are a lot of different people out there who have a lot of different views of what they want to live in. And I don't think that we should be limiting their choice in how to live. And especially, I don't think that abutting property owners, even if they may truly dislike how something subjectively looks, I don't think that they should be the ones to decide how other people, live their lives. Now, if it's something like a danger, like, a giant factory, like spewing out pollution, or a nightclub or something, then I understand some kind of limitations. But otherwise, I don't think the city's role should be in kind of conforming to the aesthetic preferences of one group of people, while at the same time harming, the aesthetic and lifestyle choices of other people. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, we'll close public hearing. Kelly, do you want to clarify?
Yeah, just to help out, Keith knows our zoning, so it makes a lot of sense to him and us what he's talking about. So specifically lots 7 and 8.
Could you point those out, because I am lost.
This is the biggest one.
Yeah, so you see where Lunetta curves around and goes west and then connects to this project. Those two lots right there, 7 and there we go. Stick on that one. Yeah. So lots 7 and 8, which back up to Damani, they're corner lots. And in our zoning ordinance, we have a unique standard for corner lots that they don't have rear yards. They have 2 fronts and 2 sides. So that is what Keith is referring to, is that a side yard setback for a one story is only 6 feet versus a rear yard is at least 20 feet. That applies just to those 2 lots. The other ones that start to round the corner, and those do have rear yards, so they would have to meet rear yard setbacks. So the 2 that are most directly related to Keith's comments are those 2 corner lots. Does that help clarify the issue between why the rear yard seems so wonky with what Keith is saying and how our normal zoning looks at corner lots?
So that seems to make some sense. And so I'm sort of surprised this hasn't come up before as an issue. So does staff have any thoughts on this?
So in what way? I mean,
well, generally we have these setbacks to create some separation between the structures. And so it seems like it's these units are inconsistent. These lots are inconsistent in terms of setback.
No, they're just corner lots, so they have a different standard than a.
But in practice, though, I agree. But in practice, though, am I misreading this?
I mean, I guess
the same as all the other corner lots out there. So would you change all the corner lots
So it's,
out there?
yeah, it happens. We have this juxtaposition where the streets change. And we had this, not the same conversation, but with the Mana, we had the same issue where offsite, the home in the prior subdivision had a different orientation. So they had, so Keith didn't have a rear yard with the Mana. He had a normal side yard setback, and he met all the standards and did everything he was supposed to do. He did what he's supposed to do. It's just when they transition on those curves, you get a different alignment of the home, and that one wall can be quite long on a short setback that could have been a side yard setback for an interior lot, but it might feel like the rear setback for this corner lot, depending on where they orient the front door.
So this is fairly unique. I mean, to Bronwyn's point, we don't have these all over the place, right? I mean, this is sort of a unique configuration.
Well, it's a corner lot standard.
Well, so the two that 7 and 8 border are also corner lots for Damani, right? With the road coming.
Yeah, but you probably don't recall that there's a 50-foot setback that Keith agreed to with the Bergesons that we weren't a part of, that shaped his project. So he won't have homes within 50 feet of that property line because of that private agreement that they entered into. So it's a little bit different in that he's forced to orient the house one way probably, and this PUD would allow for an option for that homeowner to really orient the house however they see fit, consistent with front yard and side yard setbacks. So it's probably a little hard to answer just theoretically. I think the issue is no one knows what's going on those two lots, and that's what's making someone nervous. There just isn't the predictability of those, how those lots would actually get built. And that's just speaking, and I'm not trying to speak to all of Keith's comments. I'm just trying to clarify the rear yard setback comment about how that works there.
Here's one other random point. We've had some issues in some of the other parts of our community with respect to the stormwater treatment ponds. So there's an agreement then. Will there be an HOA that's responsible for the maintenance of those?
Yeah, so tonight you see a master plan that's really showing you the intent. A lot of the functional details will be in the subdivision. So we'll have our normal 5B review as part of a stormwater management plan that goes with the preliminary plat. So this is one reason why you have this condition that you can't go build this until you have a preliminary plat, because this doesn't have infrastructure in it.
Right.
This is just lot layouts and uses.
But it's the HOA who'd be responsible for that.
It's a combination. We'll call it day-to-day maintenance as the HOA's responsibility, and then in residential subdivisions, the city takes on long-term.
That's right.
It's
Okay.
a little bit of a
Thanks.
split.
Can you explain the non-city, there's more detention pond to the east, right? That's not in the city limits. Is that?
No, the land to the east is in the city. It was part of this large annexation. So the Bergesons organized annexing all of this land down here together. So the property to the east is in the city now as part of that larger annexation. It's just off-site from this development.
Okay.
So with regard to the potential for 3-story homes, we have that potential on lot 7 and 8. Where else do we have that potential?
I think it's on all lots, isn't it? Yeah, I think
It's on all of them?
Yeah. So
Okay.
what Benjamin was saying was at the P&Z meeting, there was an adjustment to recognize that the townhomes could also be 3 stories. The single family had already been stated in the design matrix as being that. I think to Keith's comments, townhomes are probably more likely to be 3 stories than single family homes, just because you could put a garage on the first floor and 2 levels above and get to 3 stories. You just don't see that commonly in a single family home, as Keith said.
Well, I guess I would be surprised. Keith, maybe you haven't driven around South Campus all that much, but I have a 1-story home right next to 2 3-story homes. So I think it's relatively common in some of the older areas around town. And I don't know that I have as much of a problem with that standard of compatibility, simply because I live with it and it doesn't pose issues. So maybe that's a comfort, maybe it's not. But I think it is a little bit more common than we might think it is. with the older areas.
Other questions? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion. There's 3 alternatives presented in the staff report.
So just want to clarify, since this is our first PUD alternative one, if that's what you choose, there's a long list of conditions. When we do a rezoning with a master plan, we traditionally have the code requires what's called a zoning agreement to eventually come along with it. And we've been doing that with third reading to make sure that after the first public hearing, we have all the details straight. So in this case, you see the traditional zoning agreement required under alternative one, but when that actually comes back to you, it's going to be packaged up with the relevant details. So it'll be simpler for administration to understand what the requirements are for the PUD overall. So it'll be a zoning agreement with the packet of PUD standards, the concepts that are actually exhibits for administrating this PUD. So it's a little bit different. You haven't seen an alternative quite like that before, but that's because it's a PUD.
You ready for a motion?
Yeah.
I would move alternative 1.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion?
So I want to just speak just a little bit to Keith's concerns. I think they're very interesting, and hopefully there's some good faith between the developers, and they can hopefully work on some of those issues between themselves. It is not common for us to have developments be built next to each other, and some concerns about how one development will affect another. And I think some of the reason why we haven't had quite the flare-ups between developers is because there's been a lot of good faith between developers, and hopefully that will carry through here. So I want to commend the staff and planning and zoning for a lot of work to get us to this point, and sort of exciting to have a major subdivision coming in. It's going to be an exciting contribution. The city of Ames is going to benefit tremendously from this. So very exciting.
Roll call.
Aye.
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 Thank you. Anything else on this item, Kelly?
Oh, no, we don't have anything else.
All right, very good. Moving on to item number 35, hearing on conveyance of city-owned land commonly known as 241 Village Drive. Any questions for Vanessa?
So I did want to, we did get one question about the 161,000 and whether or not, why we were selling, why we're selling.
Several reasons why. We've owned this property for a little while, and we've always intended to try to sell it so that we could use the funding to go towards the Baker subdivision. And we have, staff has a lot of items on their plate regarding the ARPA funds, regarding our CDBG funds and our CARES funds, that we didn't want the property to sit any longer. And so our reach out was to Habitat for Humanity and their interest, because we've done a lot of partnerships with them. And yes, we usually pay a lot more for properties lately, but in the benefit in the long run, whether we sell it to a first-time home buyer, we likely would have been capped at $100,000 anyway. And so by selling it to Habitat, yes, we're at $100,000, but we also get a family who's even lower income than what we would have been able to sell the property to. So,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
Any other questions for Vanessa? All right, declare the public hearing on conveyance of city-owned land commonly known as 241 Village Drive to be open. Does anyone want to address council on this item? Declare the public hearing to be closed. Entertain a motion on resolution approving sale to Habitat for Humanity of Central Iowa Incorporated in the amount of $100,000.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Abstain, conflict of interest.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Moving on to number 36, hearing on Ada Hayden Heritage Park dredging of wetlands. Wetland G, cell 1. Any questions for Keith on this particular item? Declare the public hearing on this item to be open. Is there anyone that wants to address council on this topic? Hearing none, declare the public hearing to be closed. Entertain a motion on resolution approving final plan specifications and awarding the contract to Nagel Construction LLC of Allerton, Iowa, in the amount of $118,323, which is base bid and alternate number 1.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye. Aye.
Thank you. Moving on to item 37, hearing on South 16th Street improvements. Any questions for staff on this item? Hearing none, declare the public hearing on this item to be open. Anyone want to address council on this? Declare the public hearing to be closed. Entertain a motion on resolution approving final plan specifications and awarding the contract to Construct Incorporated of Ames, Iowa, in the amount of $4,085,830.80.
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Roll call.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Moving on to disposition of communications to council, there are 2 items. One is a letter from Lee Grassley, Mediacom Senior Manager, Government Relations. This is just for council's information. And the second is an email from Mary Warren regarding a request for pedestrian crossing light and repainted crosswalks. And Brian, do you want to just give a quick update on the painting aspect and also the other request?
Yeah, we can incorporate the repainting requests into the annual pavement markings repainting that's going to be occurring this summer. We're just waiting on paint supplies to arrive, and then we'll kick that off here in a couple of weeks. The other request for the intersection of Northridge Parkway and Stang Road, I think we've studied that in the past, but if the council would like, we can provide a memo to you regarding that study. The conditions may have changed since the last time we talked about it.
Do you know when the memo was last time?
Maybe 2 years.
We studied it in 2015 and presented a staff report to council at that time. Then we updated that in 2020.
Do you have an opinion on whether or not an update to that study is warranted, or is not enough time passed or development developed or occurred that would warrant?
Well, we looked at it 2 years ago, and at that time we felt the enhanced crosswalks and the dynamic feedback signs were appropriate. This is as far as I know, the only citizen comment that we've got regarding this intersection lately. So it's hard to say whether anything's changed in the last 2 years.
Okay.
So John, was that 2020 study done during COVID traffic conditions when there weren't as many cars out and about?
It would have been, yes.
So in summary, the crosswalks we repainted as a matter of just regular street maintenance.
Yeah.
Right. So the question is does council wish to have this intersection restudied once again? And if there's no motion, we'll just actually, I do want a motion, because if it's to not do the study, I like to respond back to the citizen and let them know that it was done twice, and at this time, council is not going to refer it to staff to do another study. And I suppose we probably could just send that individual the results of the study too. Is that right?
Sure. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Would move that we decline to initiate a new study.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. All right. Council comments. Gloria, I'll start with you.
I have nothing tonight.
All right. Tim?
Nothing tonight.
Nothing. Thanks.
Amber?
Nothing for me. No.
Nothing for me, thanks.
Yeah, just one quick thing. They named the next ex officio. It'll be Bryce Garman.
Sorry, can't hear it.
They named the next ex officio, and it'll be Bryce Garman. He works for the Story County Board of Supervisors, so he has some experience with local government. he gets confirmed for student government tomorrow, and then his first meeting will be April 26th.
And will you be here for that meeting too, or not?
What was that?
Will you be here for that transition?
Yes, I will be here until he gets confirmed.
All right, very good. All right, with that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
All right, those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.